Hello, I'm Kasey, and today we're going to work on a lovely sunflower. It's very rainy outside here, so I decided that's what I would do. So I'm using an 8.5 by 5.5 piece of watercolor paper out of the Strathmore book. And I am going to go ahead and just, let's see. I'm going to tape mine, let's tape it this way. I'm going to tape mine down this way. And I'm using washi tape. So this is a tape that's easy to remove. And I'm going to tape halfway on the paper, halfway on my work surface, just so that we make a nice little border around the edge. And when we're done, we can peel it away, and it's going to be really, really pretty. I don't know why our music stopped. Let's see if we can do something about that. All right, so I'm going around all 4 edges. And I just want to make a nice border. It doesn't have to be like specifically even, just kind of sort of the same. All right, so I've got my watercolors here. You can see I'm working with 8 colors. I've also got some water and of course a paper towel, and the pen we'll use later. We're not going to use that right now. So for the first step, I like to always work, when I'm working in watercolors, I like to work over here, and I like to get some of my paint and kind of bring it over here and water it down. So the reason I do this is to keep it nice and transparent. Sometimes this paint in the pan itself can get very gummy, so that's not what we want here. We want this paint to be very loose and just lovely. So I'm going to make a big puddle of nice watery yellow over here. And since this is a sunflower, maybe let's add a little tiny bit of orange. So I'm just going to add a little orange. And this is seeming super duper orange. So maybe I'll rinse my brush, I'll bring a little more water, and I'll make it a little more yellow. Because I really want this to read yellow on the paper. I don't want it to look super orangey. So I am just going to have a lot of yellow in here. So we're going to prepare some orangish yellow, enough to go around, and then we're going to prepare a little bit of brown also. Perfect. All right, so we are ready to go here. So the first thing we're going to do is make the center of our flower. And we have to remember that our flower petals are going to go out to the edge. So make your center like kind of small. So my center is going to be up here, and it's just a circle. So it's just a brown circle. Nothing complicated. It's a little dark, so I may need to add a little bit of water to this, because I do want it to be pretty watery when we come in and start working with our petals. And if you want that center to be bigger, you can always just round it out, make it a little bit larger. I like to start smaller as opposed to starting larger. That just makes more sense to me. Okay, so now we're going to start in with our petals. So we're going to rinse the brush really good. I'm going to get the water out of my brush, and I'm going to go in and I'm really going to load it up with this color. And I want the tip of that brush, so we're going to just take the very tip and kind of barely touch it to there, and then squish down and lift. And then I'm going to come back and dab some yellow into this flower, and this brown coming into the petal, that's fine. That's what we are looking for. It's absolutely fine. And we're going to do this all around the flower. So I'm going to kind of do the 4 points. So we're gonna point, squish, and lift, and then we can bring back some yellow. And I'm gonna do it up here too. So point, squish down, and then lift. And then I'm gonna fill it in with a little more paint. And I just have to dot the tip of my brush to get it to fill in like that, because we've already kind of laid the groundwork for where we want this shape to be. And you can see this brown is coming into my petal, and I'm really liking that. I think that's really pretty. Okay, and so over here it gets tricky for me, but let's see if I can do it. So I'm gonna do tip and squish down and pull right up. There we go. And then I'm gonna add some of this. I'm gonna try to sweep some of that brown back into the center, because too much of that brown was coming into the petal for me. And remember, these are all gonna dry lighter. So I'm not super worried if it looks a little bit dark right now. That's okay. All right, I need to move my water over. And now I'm gonna go kind of halfway between each of these. So tip and squishing down and pulling up. And then I'm gonna come and just kind of dab more color in there so that it fills it out. Perfect. All right, and then same thing, opposite at the diagonal. So I'm gonna barely touch the tip and then squish it down and pull it up. And then I'm gonna dab that yellow back in there. So we basically are just doing this all around. So now I'll do it here, and I'm trying to stay pretty symmetrical. That did not get very wide, did it? Let's try that again. So I'm trying to stay kind of symmetrical. So I do it here, and then I'll do it directly across. So just touch that tip to there and squish down and pull back up. And this is the brush that comes with the paint set. So if you have a different brush that you'd like to use, this mostly works with brushes that are pointy at the end. So you've got to have that nice point to come off the end, and really, when you lift that brush up, you get that lovely point. So now I'm going to put one kind of between each of these, and I'm going to try not to touch the other petals, but if I do, it's not the end of the world. So do not worry if you get a little bit of crossover. So I'm going to just touch that tip and then smash my brush down and pull it up. So we're just starting to look more like a flower each time, and I'm loving it. All right, sometimes it's hard to remember where you stopped. So I'm just gonna touch that point, smush down, and pull right up, and then go add a little bit more color to it. And I'm noticing there's some difference in the colors of these petals, and I really don't mind it. I quite like it. All right, so tip and smush down flat and pull up. And then we'll add a little more paint. It is important here to make sure that your brush is nice and loaded with paint, and it's helpful if you've brought it over here and made it very liquid, because that's going to help it flow a little bit better. I'm adding some yellow because I feel like I was running out of paint and I might need some more. So that's what I was doing there. All right. So I'm going to come over, I'm just going to touch the tip to there and smush down and pull outward and up. And this one's kind of wavy, totally fine. It's nature, so I'm not, if they're all a little tiny bit different, I'm really very okay with that. And we want one here, so we're going to touch, smush down, and come up. And then I'll just fill it in. And you can see I don't have to do a lot because that paper is already wet. And the paint kind of just seeps into all the places that we already did it. So once you have a layer of petals that is kind of around your flower, and they're mostly not touching, Then what we want is to kind of let this dry a little bit. So you can see I've got my layer, my first layer of petals is down. It's looking great. I'm loving it. It's wonderful. So we're just gonna let that dry for a moment. And while we do that, we can come down here and we can kind of paint some leaves. And we don't really know where our flower stem is gonna be yet. I don't anyway. So I'm gonna do a leaf. And when we have these 8 colors, my leaf is gonna be like a very yellow green. So I'm gonna mix green, regular old green, maybe a little more green. Sorry, our music dropped off, my friends. It's just the way it's gonna be today. Maybe I am just meant to listen to the sounds of the rain outside today. All right, so I'm gonna make this really lovely, bright, happy sunflower yellow green over here. And I'm gonna make it pretty watery again. The biggest secret to watercolor is to have the discipline to kind of build. And when you build layers, it just looks so beautiful. Watercolors aren't here to be like crayons or markers to go exactly where you want them to go. They're a little bit more temperamental, so you have to kind of learn to work with them. So that's what I'm hoping to teach you here today. Okay, so for my sunflower leaf, I'm just gonna make a big giant, and like maybe it's going off the page. That is totally fine. So I'm just gonna make this big, it's like half of a football shape, kind of. And I'm gonna completely fill it in with this. And you just want it to be nice and translucent like this. We don't want it to be a very dark, solid color. I just want to smooth this edge down. Perfect. So we know our stem will come somewhere in here. And then I'm going to make another leaf. Let's see. So this leaf is going to kind of go upward and over. And then down. I guess that's a little more symmetrical than I was planning to be. But I'm okay with this. So this is just the first layer of our leaf. We'll come back and we'll put some more love into this leaf later. But for now, we just want to get down this first little layer. And the stem, I think, is going to be the very last thing that I do. So now I'm going straight into the green. Straight into my green. And I'm going to put some little dots throughout my leaf just to give it a little bit of that natural variation. Just to make it a little bit interesting. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. This one is much wetter, so you can tell that it's doing a little more spontaneous blending than the other one, which is fine. I am not worried about it. Up here, however, where this one was a little dry and it didn't blend, I'm going to go back in and make it blend a little bit more. So I'm going to drop, there we go, I'm going to drop this darker green in there, and I think that's going to give me more of the look that I was going for. All right. Now it's time to kind of fan this and dry it a little bit. So I've just taken another piece of paper and I'm going to fan this a little bit. And the part that I want to concentrate on drying the most is the very center of the flower. So I'm just going to fan it. And if you have a little hair dryer or some other type of a fan, you can always use something that's automated. Some of us that have a little trouble with our hands or get easily fatigued might need to use something like that. You can keep them nearby if you have one. It's not super important that the edges of these petals be dry. So I have a lot of paint that's kind of trailing to the end. That's gonna look really cool, so I'm not worried about it. I just wanna get this middle part a little more dried. All right, it's looking like it's working. So for the next layer of petals, I want them to be, it's the same color, but I'm gonna make it just a tiny bit, maybe just a tiny bit yellower. So I'm using that same puddle of paint that I used before, but I want it to be brighter yellow. So I'm not adding nearly as much orange. The orange that was in there from before is all that I need, I think. We'll see. I think it'll be fine like this. But I do want it to be a little more watered down than just dipping out of that paint. You may not care, but this is just really makes a big difference to me in the way the paint acts when I put it on the paper. All right, so now we're gonna do kind of the same thing we did before, but we're gonna go between each of these petals, and we're gonna kind of like, we're overlapping them a little bit. So can you see how that's working? So I'm going between each of these petals, and I might be touching, oh, my tape is coming off. Let me put that back down. Get on there, tape. It's not time for you to be done with your job just yet. Okay, so we're just gonna go back in, and we're gonna put petals down between the existing petals. And now that your hand is a little more familiar with making this shape, it might be a little easier. So you're just gonna go smash it flat and pull up. So you're touching with the tip of your brush, smashing it down and pulling up. And it's okay if you're overlapping the petals that are already there. That's part of the magic. It's kind of what we want. So the tip and smush down and pull up. And the tip and smush down and pull up. There's a little bit of that magic right there. That's what we're looking for. All right, so we're using the tip and we're smushing down and pulling up. Tip, smush down and pull it up. Pop that bubble. And we're going to use the tip and smush down and pull it up. And the tip, smush down, pull it up. That one needs a little more paint in it. My brush was a bit dry when I got started there. All right, that's better. Let's put a little more water in this paint over here. If you notice that your paint isn't quite flowing enough, just put some more water in it. That is what I had to do just now. All right, so the tip and smush down and pull up. That's a little better. It is harder for me with my right hand to paint these petals over here on the left side. All right, tip, smush down and pull up. And tip, smush down and pull up. All right, so this is really starting to look amazing, like mine is. I don't know about you, but mine's looking great. I have a lot of liquid in the center of my flower, so I'm gonna dry out this brush. And I'm gonna come over here, and this is like what I like to call the paint vacuum, but it's technically, it's called lifting. So I'm gonna come over here with my dry brush, and I'm gonna lift this paint out of here that's just sitting, like it's just very watery. So I'm gonna lift it. And you can do that anywhere you like, but I want this to stay. I want these to blend and be kind of interesting. So I'm just gonna leave it like that right now. All right, so now we can come in and we can add some interest to these leaves because they're drying pretty well. Let's fan it maybe just a little bit. All right. So another, like part of the strategy of what I do when I'm working in watercolors is I work on one thing and then I work on something in a different area because it gives this time to dry while we work down here. All right, so I'm gonna go back into this green. I don't know if we have enough of this green. So I'm gonna make a little bit more. All right, and I am just gonna come on the edge of this leaf like this with this paint. And this is kind of one of the ways we can shade with watercolor. So I'm painting the same color that I just used over top very lightly. So now it's kind of like we have two different halves. And over here, I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna paint the bottom half. So I'm gonna make it just a little bit different. And this tape is just not sticking well today. It is one of those days when the tape doesn't stick. We may have a security breach over there when we go for the reveal, but that's okay. I think the rest of the flower is going to be very successful, so no one will notice the tape issues I'm having. All right, so you can see how that just gives it a little bit of a little something. And I'm going to go back into that green like I did before, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of blue. So I'm making some green down here. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of blue to it. We don't need a lot of blue, just a little is enough to make that green, take that green down a notch and just really make it a different green. And I'm going to put some little, just some nice little dots in here. And in the other section that I just painted. So we're just giving it a little bit of added interest. And then I don't know that we're done with this flower yet, so I am not gonna do the stem just yet. So now I wanna go back into this yellow, and I'm really gonna make sure that I have a nice watery bunch of yellow here. I'm going to add some more water to it, 'cause sometimes we just need a little more fluidity in our paint. We need it to be waterier. And then I am going to put the tiniest bit of orange that I can pick up into this yellow paint. Yeah, that's plenty. So I'm just making it just the tiniest bit orangier. Ooh, it's raining harder outside. It's a lovely day to be inside painting. Okay, so now I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna put some petals wherever I think I need them, but they're gonna be a little bit shorter. So like, I'm just gonna come up and I'm done there. So can you see how those are a little bit shorter? That's what I'm doing. If you want yours to be the same length, that'll probably work out as well, but mine are just gonna be a little bit shorter. Just to floof it out and give it a little bit of definition and crossover and some color here in the middle. And these don't really have to be in any symmetrical form. I'm just kind of finding places that I feel might need a little more color. And you could do this all day long. Like you could go keep adding more little layers of petals all day long. And it would never stop looking amazing. Like it just gives it a little more dimension every time you add another of these layers. And it just makes it very dreamy. All right. So now we're gonna give this some time to dry because I want this to be very, very dry. So I'm going to fan. And I will let you in on a little secret. We're not done with the center of that sunflower. When our petals get nice and dry in the middle, we're gonna go back in and we're gonna add some more depth to the middle of that flower. It's gonna look really neat. Wow, I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but it's thundering at my house. It's super rainy today. And like I said, you can always take some time and you can use, I love what this paint is doing here. It's giving me a very interesting little look. You can always take some time and grab a hairdryer, or if you happen to have like an embossing gun at your house. I know most people probably don't have that. Ooh, thunder. The grass and the trees and all my plants outside are gonna be so happy. All right, how is it looking? Still not quite dry there through the middle, so I'm gonna keep fanning. I don't know if you've ever driven by one, but there are a couple of times in my life when I have driven by just a gigantic field of sunflowers, and it just looks like the happiest place in the world. It's all these big happy yellow flowers. It's just like there are hundreds of little flowers that want to be your friend. I just love them. All right. So next for the center, we have this brown over here. I'm gonna mix a little bit of black with it. And you don't need a lot of black at all. This black paint will really very quickly darken whatever it is you're working on. All right, so now I have kind of a dark brown. And I'm gonna go through and just kind of make some little dots here and there. And be sure that you have a paper towel nearby for this step. So I'm gonna make my little dots. And this is pretty dry. So you can see it's not bleeding too much. Like it's not completely dry because it's not tomorrow, but it's pretty dry. So I am just touching all of these little shapes in here, and I'm sort of trying to make them kind of close together without the puddles all just, well, there's one that just ran together. But that is what I'm trying to do. I'm just kind of trying to give it some texture here in the center. And then I'm gonna dry out my brush, and I'm gonna come back and pull up a little bit of that paint. So I'm kind of vacuuming it. It's my paint vacuum. Because what we want here in the middle is just a very dotty look. Like we want that texture. So then I can go back in and I can add more black to this brown where we have a pretty black color. Like this is pretty dark. And then I'm just gonna put here and there a little bit of black. So this is when we start talking about how watercolor is really just about building layers. So now I'm coming to these edges here, and I am putting the tiniest dots of black possible around these edges. right where the petals meet the center. And you want to make sure that the petal area is very dry before you do this, or else it'll bleed into the petal. And at this point, that's not what we're going for. So I'm just trying to make this dark in some places, light in some places. And I am using the super tippy tip of this brush. So that is my flower center, and I think I'm done with my flower. If you want, you can dry your brush out. If you have any like really watery areas, you can go and take some paint away. I think I'm going to do that a little bit. But we just want this center to have a lot of different brights and darks in it with that black and brown. So that is my plant center. And now I think I'm going to go ahead and add a stem. So I'm going to go back into this leaf color that we used, and maybe I'm going to add a little bit more green. So let's add a little more green to that. But it's still pretty loose. It's pretty watery. And I don't want to get into any of these. So I'm just going to start right here and smush down and make my little curvy stem. And I'm trying not to really touch that yellow part. But what has to happen is this has to get fatter at the bottom so that it can touch the leaves, because the leaves are growing out of the stem. So it's kind of like a really fat stem. And I think I like it. I like this fat stem. It is bringing me joy. All right, so there's that. Now what we can do is go back into this darker, like this bluish green that we made over here. It's green. It's just it's not a very yellowy green. It's a green, but it's got a bit of that dark blue in it. So it makes it's bringing it into the aqua place. All right, so I'm gonna go on my leaf here, and I'm just gonna make a line down the middle, and then I'm gonna bring some lines up the side. And this is using the very tip of my brush, and until I get to the edge. And I'm just kind of making these diagonal lines. So that's giving my leaf some interest. And same thing over here. I'm just gonna line the edge, and then we're gonna pull these little tiny lines up. And since we're painting on top of something that already was wet, it might make a straight line. It might blend in, but that's either way, that's just how it's gonna be. And it will look fine. If yours doesn't look exactly like mine, I don't want you to get a bee in your bonnet, because everyone's painting is different, and that's what we're going for. All right, so we have our leaf lined out, and then I'm just gonna start making my little leafy details. And this one, I hope you can still see, let's see. So I'm just taking the very tip of my brush and dragging it up and along to give it that interest. And I'm loving what's happening here. Like the color has bled in a little bit, and it's kind of cool. I like it a lot. All right, so then I'm gonna go into my stem, and I'm gonna try not to touch up there. And I'm just kind of shading this stem a little bit, like I'm coloring half the stem with this darker color. And then if we want to get super fancy, we can come in with some of this yellow and dot it around on that stem. And just brighten it up a little bit. And I feel like this side needs a little brightening too, so I'm going to come down with my yellowy green action, and there we go. So now we're kind of finished. You do have the option to do some speckling if you'd like to. That is something that I think is always fun. Let's see, what color speckles would we throw on this picture? I think yellow speckles could be fun. If you like it and it's perfect and you don't want to change it, don't do this part. But I'm going to do this part because I really like to put, I really like speckling my stuff. I think it's great. I think it's fun. I think it adds a lot of interest. So I'm doing some orange speckles. It just makes it a little bit more sunshiny. And on this one, if you're wondering, well, why didn't she put a color in the background? That's too complicated. If we have all of these pokey parts of a plant and we go try to put a background color in, I think it's really gonna take away, it's gonna end up being a little more frustrating than most of us would like. So I'm choosing not to do that today. I think I'm also gonna put some blue speckles. So I'm just gonna water it down over here. Wow, that was really strong. Maybe that wasn't the best decision of the day, but here we are. It's what's happening. All right, so there is my super speckly painting. I'm gonna fan it a little bit so that I can pull this tape and sign it. I think it's gonna look really great though. I'm very happy with it. If you have a white pen later, you could always go in and you could put some little white dots in the center just to make that sunflower center have a little bit more depth even. But I am very happy with it the way it is. My super rainy day sunflower. I'm loving it. This tape did not want to stick today. Sometimes when it's more humid, maybe the tape doesn't like to stick. But I don't know about you, but I love the way the overlapping of these leaves looks. I just think, or the leaves, the petals, the overlapping of the petals, I think just looks really, really great. I am a fan of it. All right, so I'm noticing that my edges are pretty dry. So I think I'm almost to the point where I can pull this tape. My stem is still a little bit wet, so I'm gonna wait. I'm just gonna fan it a little bit more. All right, I am totally ready to pull this tape. So see how this one did. Oh, that leaf behaved. That leaf was good. We didn't get any yuckiness. That side worked out well also. I know the top did because all we had was speckles. And then hopefully the bottom also worked out. Awesome, it did. All right, so this is my finished piece and I'm gonna sign it right down here. And you can put the year, you can put your full name, just your first name, whatever you want. But I love it. And I am glad that you chose to spend this time with me today. And for that, I'm giving you some pom-pom cheers. Woo-hoo! Art is a great way to relax. And I hope that I have taken you to a lighter, happier place here for a little while. Feel free to keep painting. You don't have to stop just because we're done with this video. You can keep going as long as you want. Paint whatever you'd like. Cheers!